So in the first segment, we're just building a rapport with Shamil Ismail, the author of The Age of Decay, and just looking at the trends, the methodology that he had used to compile the book that is quite thought-provoking, especially if the wrong choices continue to be perpetuated. If I can call it that, Shamil, wrong choices if people decide not to have children.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it wrong choices. I'll get in trouble for that. But as I said just before the break, I'm just trying to highlight this is a path that we're on. People make their own decisions. I'm not trying to say this. But what's one of the consequences of having single children is eventually our lives will become more difficult, and then possibly that will tip people to go back to the sort of the old method of, okay, maybe we need a few more kids to actually make life easier for us.
Yeah, but you also use the character Eva
Yes.
to illustrate some of the factual and very technical aspects of what population shrinkage could mean. And she finds herself having to navigate the challenges of not only retirement, but not having anybody there. So there's loneliness, there's all sorts of things there.
Correct. So the use of Eva, I call it the Eva stories. Every chapter sort of opens with the Eva story, which is a fictional character set sometime in the future, roughly 70 years from now, in some sort of undisclosed location in an urban environment. And the idea behind it was really because the book is so laden with data and facts and trends, and I just wanted to sort of bring it home and personalize it and say, look, this could be you. The Eva character could be any one of us at some future point. And this is what you will go through. So when there's high inflation for just repair services or basic things, when there's out of stocks in stores because the supply chain is breaking down.
Yeah, and also the daughter-mother dynamics in Eva, there's a level of resentment where she feels, because she had a dysfunctional relationship with her mom and therefore didn't have children, almost blames the mother, where she says, she wishes she had children.
So Eva's got one child, Matthew. But the realization at some stage becomes that maybe I should have had 2 or 3 kids, because you can't just bank on one kid, because that kid, it's him or herself, is also struggling to cope in that environment. So it becomes, you feel kind of guilty to having to be a burden on your child. And we people in the West, especially in more developed markets, rely on pensions. What I illustrate in the sort of later chapters in the book is the economic impact on it, and the fact that pensions could actually be sort of whittled away, and pensioners could struggle. Yeah,
so with the one child, obviously Eva also feeling that she can't just reach out to him because he's got his own life.
Yes.
Being reluctant to make that phone call. Again, it comes back to just a lonely existence. She's got the cat, of course, but that's very little consolation.
Yes, so unfortunately, I mean, I'd say unfortunately, because if you look at the increased lifespan, people live longer because of better healthcare. So that period where you do have that sort of loneliness could be protracted, whereas in the past, when you had a lifespan a life expectancy that was 10 years shorter than it is today, you don't have to endure that for too long. But in future, I mean, with longer life expectancy, that will actually just make things worse.
Yeah, but how do you can't necessarily turn back the hand of time, so to speak, and adopt a child or somebody who's going to be a caregiver. You obviously would have to invest for your old age and not just rely on your children.
Yeah. So the idea with this book is essentially, if you look at the time frame, I'm expecting things to start manifesting, or the science to start manifesting around about 2040, when you see around about 7 countries having a shortage of 7 million workers. Decade there later, in 2050, it just ramps up significantly. So the generation, the youngsters, that's around roughly 20 years old now, when they reach the sort of 50s and 60s, they will sort of really experience this. It's not really something that's imminent, but I can already see the signs. And in the book, I use various examples around the world, going from Italy to Japan to China, of how these things are actually manifesting.
Okay, let's talk immigration, especially for economic opportunities, not only provincially, but around the continent and the globe as well. That's brain drain of critical skills and how that impacts on populations.
So the positive thing for Africa is that we've got still very high fertility rates across the continent. South Africa is a bit more like a Western country, developed country with relatively low population growth. But the rest of the continent, even by the end of the century, the fertility rate will be double the replacement rate. So the opportunity for Africa is huge. I've got a chapter there referred to it as the African century. And basically at the end of the century, 40% of working age people would be born in Africa. Now, the rest of the world could potentially become a massive retirement village. There will be need of labor, and Africa will be a great source of that.
Yeah, which is something we've seen with the Philippines, primarily providing, healthcare, if not domestic work type of work. Yes. In the US.
Yeah. Now, the benefit of looking at it globally, as I did in this book, was you can see that even countries that did provide labor before, like China, for example, drew labor or Japan drew labor from China and Philippines and Vietnam. But when you look at those countries, they themselves will be running out of labor in the decades to come. So there's only going to be a few pockets of opportunity that will still have a high enough fertility rate to supply that labor.
Mm-hmm. But what about artificial intelligence, automation, and that kind of thing, robotics? Won't that fill the gap for the labor shortage?
Yes, so yes and no, but the reality is that a lot of the AI development that's taking place now is actually focused on high-end jobs. So when you look at this, so in the book I go back in history, I look at when technology was first deployed to improve productivity. Go back 100 years, you had farms that's been mechanized, so you've got combines that can harvest huge fields and eliminate the need for labor. In the 1960s, the first industrial robot was deployed in a factory in General Motors in the US, and now those robots are all over the place. So where we're at in 2023, if a basic job hasn't been mechanized yet, there's a very good reason for it. And it's probably not viable or feasible to do it. And that's why we don't have robotic plumbers or something like that. So what AI and ChatGPT and those type of things are doing, they're actually targeting the knowledge worker. So they make, they can write a book, they can draw designs, they can do all sorts of things.
Yeah. And I think I also want to touch on Eva, back to her again in her golden years, whether there needs to be a review of the retirement policy, especially with the life expectancy, that people are sitting at home while they're still able to function. So that's something that we can explore just after the short break. Do stay with us here on The Bookshelf.